Joining us now to talk about this and more is Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California and a ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, great to have you here.
Thank you.
So this is reporting that comes this morning from the Huffington Post. As you heard Christine say, CNN is attempting to look into it as well. But according to the Huffington Post, it's just a very simple connection. I mean, let me just read their headline. This is their lead paragraph. A mere 72 hours after the Chinese government agreed to put $500 million into that Indonesian project that will personally enrich Donald Trump, the president, Donald Trump, ordered a bailout for a Chinese government-owned cell phone maker. It can't possibly be this naked of a quid pro quo, can it?
Well, it can be. The problem is we really don't know. And this is the issue when the president won't divest his business holdings, when the family still attempts to leverage the presidency to gain business. And, you know, one thing that you could definitely say about China, given the strong state intervention in that economy, is nothing happens by accident. Now, early on, the president considered doing away with one China policy, something very important to China. Now, he later abandoned that. And when he abandoned that, magically, mysteriously, China gave the Ivanka brand trademarks that it had long sought. I can guarantee you China would not have given those brands if Donald Trump had followed through on his campaign commitment to not recognize one China. Similarly here, I can't imagine China going forward with this transaction helping a Trump-branded property in Indonesia to the tune of $500 million if the president continued the sanctions on ZTE. It's just hard to imagine.
Yes, and just to be clear, ZTE, this Chinese company, was sanctioned and violated the sanctions of doing business with Iran and North Korea. Even the president's fierce supporters yesterday seemed confused about why he would say he wants to save Chinese jobs. What else could this be?
Well, it could be a few things. I mean, it obviously could be related to China doing him this huge business favor. It also could be related to the fact that having walked out of the Iran deal, the president now needs a deal with North Korea more than Kim Jong-un. And desperate to get a deal with North Korea, he is now seeking to curry favor with China. And maybe he recognizes that if he is too hard on China in trade with ZTE, then China won't help him on North Korea, and then he'll end up with two nuclear problems. But of course, all of America will end up with two nuclear problems, not one.
But do you see this as a violation of the Emoluments Clause?
I certainly view this as a violation of the Emoluments Clause, yes, and many others as well, both foreign in terms of, you know, the business effort to expand the Trump organization, but also domestically by, and this may not be a constitutional violation, but it's certainly an ethical violation, by the constant milking of the federal government when the president requires the federal government to patronize Trump-related businesses. The federal government has spent over $150,000, just the Secret Service alone, for the privilege of renting Donald Trump golf carts to protect Donald Trump on his rounds. That's obscene. And that should never be permitted. It should never be permitted that there's even a question about whether this foreign transaction is driving U.S. policy. And this is exactly what the Emoluments Clause is designed to prevent.
So enter Congress. What do you do about all this?
Well, you know, on the domestic emoluments, I have a bill that I'm going to be introducing this week that requires disclosure of any sums that the federal government is paying the business of the president. So at least the American taxpayer can find out, okay, what's the tab? What is this president charging the American people for the privilege of being our president? But in terms of these foreign and more serious emoluments problems, the Congress ought to be doing hearings on this, the Government Reform Committee.
And why aren't you?
Well, look, Trey Gowdy, when he was the chair of government reform, couldn't investigate Benghazi or the Clintons enough. But now that we have a different president, he says Congress shouldn't be in the business of investigations. As long as he's chairing that committee, as long as the Republicans are in the majority, they're not going to do oversight of this president. It's a sad reality.
Is that right? I mean, they're not going to do oversight of this president. Have you talked to Trey Gowdy about this? I mean, obviously that's not how he would phrase it.
Well, you know, we certainly talked about it in the Russia context where the Republicans decided, you know, we're not interested in what Russia did anymore. We're not interested in what the Trump organization did anymore. We're only interested in helping the president by investigating our own FBI. So it's quite clear that far from doing oversight, they're actually doing things to prevent meaningful oversight and meaningful investigation.
I want to move on to what's happening this week. There is an all-member House briefing called by Speaker Paul Ryan about election tampering, I guess, or election security. Do you know why he's taking this measure, and what do you expect to learn in that briefing?
I would expect that it's the result of a lot of concern expressed by members on both sides of the aisle that we're going into the midterms really unprepared to deal with potential Russian intervention. And what many people may have forgotten about the last election is the Russians not only hacked the DNC and got involved in the presidential election, but the Russians also hacked the DCCC, the campaign arm of the Democratic Party in the House, with the intent of basically damaging Democratic candidates for Congress. And so there's a real concern that the Russians will again get involved in the midterms in a way to cause mischief, sow discord, or favor one party over the other.
Has the president done enough? What do you want the president to do about this?
There are two things that in a normal administration we would have seen happen by now that still need to happen. And the first is the president needs to order a whole of government response where every agency, every department, every cabinet member presents to the president, here's our plan. Here's the plan at State Department to discourage the Russians from intervening. Here's our cyber response plans at the Department of Defense. Here's our intelligence agency report on what we see in terms of Russian plans and intentions. None of that is happening because for those cabinet members to be raising this with the president, he would consider a threat to his legitimacy. So that's the first thing that should be going on. And the second thing is there ought to be a national consensus led by the President of the United States that if a foreign party intervenes again, we will all reject it, no matter which party it helps and which it hurts. But this is a president who continues to say it didn't happen, it's a witch hunt, it's a hoax. And so we can hardly expect that kind of leadership from the president.
All right, I'll be very curious to see what Speaker Ryan tells you all in that meeting this week. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you.